I mean, we can wear them like regular. It won't hurt. We can wear them.
But we won't be able to hear each other.
We'll try to put them on and see. I mean, we can. It's just a little bit quieter. And we
What?
can hook all that up.
What?
And Hey, if you guys don't know, this is Adam Shaw.
Hello.
And this is our illustrative artist series. You're the first non-tattooer.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's cool. I mean, we get what we can. It's like you came all the way to the house for it, so that's awesome.
Well,
So what we've been trying to do really with this series, and I know I didn't tell you a lot about it, but I trusted you just to come on and say smart things because you've done this a lot of times before.
a few times.
Yeah. And we taught our foundations course together.
Right.
Yeah.
We did that.
Which was cool. So the whole point of this series, what I started thinking about, I did this illustrative workshop with the guy who's tattooing my back, Andy Chambers, really good illustrative tattooer, and he has a very kind of defined process in how he just from start to finish, from concept through the tattoo, super defined. And I started thinking about it and thinking about my kind of lack of process a lot of times, and like how I kind of meander a lot and waste a lot of time. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to get better at being a good illustrative tattooer, I should find good illustrators and find out about their processes for free.
I know some.
Yeah.
So I'll get you in contact.
Oh, sweet. Great.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where this thing started. When I sat down, I started making a list of people I wanted to talk to. I put you down as one of the first names because of for those who don't know, you've got a background in. I'll let you maybe run through that instead of me since I've been talking the whole time. Just go through your background in case no one's seen any of our previous episodes together.
Oh, okay. Well, I did go to art school and study painting, but I'm really into illustration, and a lot of my oil paintings are narrative based. They look like some storybook illustration or something. So I've done comics, I've done book covers, illustrated books, and I've also done murals and illustrated some documentaries. So and those
like storyboarded.
Well, storyboarded, right? And also I'll do an illustration that they'll show while they're talking about the topic or something.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah.
What kind of documentaries?
They're all on gangsters.
Really?
Yeah. American gangsters in Kansas City and Chicago, and really interesting stuff. I mean, it's called Gangland Wire, and I've done a couple of things for them.
Where do you find the documentaries?
They have a podcast. If you look up Gangland Wire, it's on there.
Okay. I can remember we've known each other, been friends for a long time now, but before we were friends, we were from the same city. We kind of went to the same high school. You were gone by the time I got there. But then whenever I was at Memphis College of Art, I went to you did like a brown bag lunch where at art school, sometimes for lunch, people will go and sit in the auditorium and an artist who's actually making a living as an artist comes in and shows their portfolio and answers questions while everyone eats lunch. And I can remember, going to yours, and even back at that point, like you were doing a lot of like large scale kind of oil painting, and all of the paintings seemed like a moment was captured in the middle of a story, but I really didn't know what was going on. Like I can, but it made you want to know, what was going on. And that was the first kind of time that I had seen, I guess what I call like fine art, shown in that way. I didn't look at a lot of, I didn't know a lot of other folks who did that, especially in my own town. So that kind of caught my attention. I can remember a painting stands out to me that was a bunch of kids laying in a living room floor, and one of them's playing a video game. So there's the blue light of the video game, and half the kids are passed out asleep. And for me at that age, that was just that's me and my friends, but I guess thinking about how, because it's mostly tattooers that watch this. The thing that seems like it probably lends itself most closely to tattooing would be book covers, or like you said, illustrations for a documentary or something like that. Because when you've done full on comics as well, but those are sequential images, so the story is told,
Yeah.
over a period of time. But for a cover, you kind of have to capture. It's similar to a tattoo. You kind of have to capture the essence in one image, and people need to know something about what they're getting into, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A cover includes a lot of storytelling, and I mean, you're getting into, just like you said, like comics are, each panel, you're just a little bit of the story. But yeah, a cover, it has to include everything, and also you're trying to make the client happy, and there's a lot going on in the covers. It's tough to do, but and hard to get into, but it's really rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what, if you don't mind, because what I am trying to do is tease out processes. Can you run through, like, if you have something that's clearly defined? Let's just take. I know you're doing like some pulp covers and things like that for a while. Maybe go through a little bit of your process if you are, given a job to illustrate the cover for a pulp novel or something like that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm usually given 3-4 sentences of a description and the name of the book and the character they want to feature on the book, and then sometimes they have input on what they want, and sometimes I get a little bit of the text. Usually I don't. There have been jobs that I've done where they said, read this, and I have to stay up all night and read.
They want you to read the entire book.
Yeah, that's happened a few times.
Huh.
But yeah, I'm a pretty slow reader, so I have to,
So you rely on a summary or just whatever they're trying. But so you're kind of dependent in that case on their interpretation of what they want to pull out about the book, which I guess is real similar to tattooing. That's what usually.
Yeah. I would imagine it is. So I usually put some thumbnails together, and
just from out of your head. No, you're not looking at reference when you start thumbnailing.
I have a lot of. Sometimes it's out of my head. I have a lot of action figures in my studio, and I'll put them together and take little shots, and just to get an idea of space and composition and lighting, and and those are so easy to just light and. I don't know tattoo artists do that. Do you have action figures? I don't see any around.
I don't have any action figures, no, but that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you are tattooing figures a lot. Yeah. So are they like, I mean, I've been to your studio. I know a lot of the kind of characters that I guess that you have, but you just have action figures because you've enjoyed action figures throughout your life, but you could do just the same thing with those. What do you call them? Like the.
Well, there's a I don't know. There's a company called Fison that makes a pretty, accurate little. I guess it's like a 12-inch doll, and I have a male and female, and I have some clothing, and it freaks all my family out. But they are really cool, and you can light them, and the skin is really cool because the way it reflects light is kind of. Skin-like, and they're made for artists and other people.
Yeah.
But
artists and other people.
No, I think there are people that really collect it, and they're very, very serious about it and collect clothing and all kinds of stuff. But I do still occasionally get an action figure of a character, but it's usually because I'm thinking about. I want to do a painting of a character like that or that character. Like I have a thing, from a Fantastic Four one that I've drawn and painted, and you get all the textures and everything you need right there. It's for stuff like that, it's invaluable. I mean, it's really a cool thing.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking of a different set when you first started describing the characters. Don't you have what are the ones that are they're made for artists, they're gray, and they're kind of like it's just all the planes of the body and face, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, those are I have a set of those. I think I showed you.
I've seen those.
Those are really cool. That's anatomytools.com or something, and they have that. Yeah, they have
they're fairly expensive, aren't they?
They're pricey, but they're really tightly detailed, and I have like a a really tall one. I don't know if you remember my studio. That
I don't
is
remember a big one.
the skin, the muscles and skin, and
Oh.
I mean the skin is pulled away, and you see muscles and structures.
Oh yeah, maybe so.
And
Maybe I have
it's
seen that one.
it's a really cool one.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are great. They're not movable. They don't have any that are bendable and you can pose them, but they have male and female busts and stuff to draw from.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I had it in my head that they moved, so they probably wouldn't be as useful for trying to build little compositions to photograph.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I usually those come in later when I need like detailed faces and stuff like that. Sometimes I'll use that. But after doing some thumbnails, I usually show them to the client, and they'll pick one that they like, and then I go into a phase of actually finding references online or taking my own references. And then doing a mock-up in Photoshop. And I was talking to you about the Smart School. I took a class with Dave Palumbo, who he's a really great artist.
Yeah.
And he went through his whole process of putting Photoshop together. He uses like a figure program like Daz Studio, the little 3D program, and it's pretty simple to use, and you can light it in any way, and then he's pretty intense about taking photo references. He was showing us all these shots of. He was doing a commission of Moon Knight, and he was showing us all these shots of him just with the camera on, automatic, and he was throwing a sheet up in the wind, billowing a sheet so he could get the cape just right. And he must have had like,
Ton of
50
photos.
hundreds of shot just of the cape. But
Yeah.
so he was intense about getting the right cape shape.
Yeah.
And I was just like blown away because,
Would
I'm
that
usually,
overwhelm you to have like 50 reference photos to choose from?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, but I think he's kind of looking at them with each shot and saying, "No, that's not quite right. No, that's not quite right." So, yeah, it can be overwhelming. It can take a lot of time, but if you really want that, if you're really intense about getting the right one, I think it's important. It can be really important.
Yeah. So you've been doing this is called Smart School, and it's and you what's the process like? What do you?
Well, it's all online, and it's just like once a week. It's like a 3-hour Zoom class, and usually the instructor has a presentation he wants to give you, and then every week the students upload something they've been working on. And usually,
is it an assignment from him, or is it something you've been working on that you just want critiqued?
some of them they give you like a little assignment. The culture of, like I said, I'm only taking 3, but the culture of this school is like mostly fantasy illustrators, like comic book stuff, and then they're really into magic. Like I think a lot of the students have gone on and worked for Wizards of the Coast and done magic work, and so it's kind of geared toward kind of fantasy stuff. I mean, a lot of the classes, and a lot of the students are bringing in stuff. So one of the classes I took with Donato Giancola, I don't know if he's a fantasy artist, really amazing. He gave us like actual, I think, things that were from Magic, like the editor or the art director would send you like a little description of do this, and So we were doing a practice Magic card kind of composition, and so over the semester we show them every week our progress, upload it, and then they talk about it.
Yeah. So has that changed your process? Because your process, I assume, was pretty well developed with decades of working. But then you've always been someone. As long as I've known you, you've always taken workshops from I mean, I know you took a workshop from Jeff Watts at one point, and you had, I forget who came to your studio and spent a week or so when you were here in Memphis. So you've always, I'm drawing a blank on, I know the name, but I can't think of it right now. So you've always like been really open to like incorporating other people's processes kind of into your own, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this online school is about, is just trying to learn what people are doing, and if you can incorporate that stuff. I mean, and yes, I've just in the last year, I've really kind of adjusted how I do things and how I look at stuff. I mean, consistently on those classes, it was, a big emphasis on value, when you're setting up your structure of your composition, value is really important. One thing that Dave Palumbo would do is he would I'm giving away all the secrets, but he in Photoshop he would switch his reference composition over to black and white. And that would really tell you right away what your values were doing, which was, was kind of cool. I was like, oh yeah, I need to do that. Yeah.
So he would have photographic reference in color, and he would just switch it to grayscale and just see what it.
And he painted from grayscale too. He had a color scheme in mind, and I asked him, do you do any color studies at all? He's like, no, I'm just. He has something in his head, and I guess it kind of evolves while he's painting. But he just had the black and white reference next to him, which was cool.
And so would he pull? So he'll paint from the black and white reference, and then just invent color, or will he convert it back to color and use the color photo as reference?
No, I mean he's inventing color as he paints.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know, I could be wrong. You should have him on.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Sounds like it. Oh, yeah, I'd like to get back to your process, but that is interesting.
Well, that's I'm trying to learn, so I've been doing the last couple of paintings. I've been trying to switch over to the black, just so the value structure is really there. It's like I know where my star is. We've talked about that. Know your star and make sure everything's serving that. The value, the shapes.
Yeah. Do you ever simplify it completely to like just black and white, just like almost abstract shapes? Can you as far as say you have 3 figures in in an alley, or 2 figures in an alley at night? I know especially some of that pulp stuff, maybe a guy with a heavy dark jacket and a light source off in the distance or something like that. Do you ever it's not the workshop that you and I did together. That was no, we did Carrie Dunn's workshop. I don't think that's not the one where it was Casey Ball that did. He would just take everything that was 50% gray and darker and make that black, and everything that was 50% or light or 49% or lighter, make that white. And he was just trying to so of course you couldn't even tell what anything was. He was just trying to just see if the black and white were kind of balanced at all, and if the shape seemed interesting before he started to pull any recognizable imagery back into it. And I think the thing was if you can't make the simple shapes interesting, then you're not going to fix it with complex shapes.
Yeah. I think, there is some of that. I mean, I do that too. I think one way to do that is when you're putting your reference together, put a filter on there, that's really blurry, and make sure those shapes are working. Yeah. Just even before you start putting in your detail. And when I'm painting, if I'm doing an actual oil painting or acrylic, those shapes start that way anyway. For me, I'm always working as if I'm looking at a big slide on the wall, and it starts out of focus and then slowly comes into focus. So I'm adding detail everywhere as I go. There are a lot of painters that are just starting on one side of the canvas and detailing out until they reach the other side. And I've never been able to do that. Yeah,
me either. I know tattooers who, and just this is a super broad generalization, but in my just experience watching tattooers learn to paint in oil, especially if they're learning to paint realistically, and they may become very accomplished at it, but they so often they like finish it as they go, like they might a tattoo.
Yeah.
So you have like literally like white canvas or board, and then completely rendered areas, and it's like that way of thinking has never made any sense to me at all.
Yeah, I have trouble with that, but I mean, if it works for some people, I mean, there's a lot of arts that work that way, and it's great. I guess tattoo, just the process of it, you have to start at one end and move down, right? You can't pop all over the place.
Yeah, typically, that's right. Because you're, for one thing, you have a stencil that you're working with most of the time,
Right.
and as you're rubbing your hand across it, it's getting softer and more blurry and wiping away. And a lot of times you need that stencil. So at the very least, you need to get a permanent stencil in place. Even if you don't care if there are bold outlines everywhere, you at least want to like scratch the skin enough to make sure that it's irritated. There's enough of a line for you to know that it's there. But then from there on, I think the reason that a lot of tattooers work that way is because it's really more comfortable it's more difficult on the client if you're bouncing all over the place and they can't settle into an area.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
That's
like,
true.
especially if they're not looking at the piece and you're working on the back of their arm and they're on their phone, and the next thing you know, you're right in the bend of their arm and they're like, oh, I wasn't ready for that. At least if you're in one place, they can kind of settle into what that feels like. So yeah, you're probably right. That might be why so many tattooers are so methodical in the way that they paint if they started as tattooers. So you had said earlier, so you're after your one thing I thought was interesting that you said is you thumbnail out and then you send the thumbnails over to the
Client.
author, the client, whoever's making the decisions. Is that just something that you do, or is that just kind of common practice?
I think that's common in that kind of illustration world. Yeah, you're sending. I mean, you want your thumbnails to look presentable.
Yeah.
But I mean, you don't want to get too far into it before the client says, no, that's wrong, or I want to change this or that,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I feel like if I were to show, I've gotten away from showing my clients really a lot of anything. For the most part, they don't see their tattoo until the day they're getting it. But that's just.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, but I didn't used to do it that way. That's something that's developed over the years, and I've also gained a lot of trust with the clientele, and and a lot of times it's just the same people over and over. So it's like I've already done tattoos they're happy with, and so they trust me. But the reason that I started to wait later and later to show work was because they would. First off, I gave them multiple options. I felt like they always picked my least favorite of the options, and then second, if I showed them anything too early, they may love it, and then they start showing it off to their friends, and then their friends are like, "Oh, it'd be cool if there was a bird there. That'd be awesome if you did this." And then suddenly, the thing they were perfectly happy with, they've gotten all this outside input. But of course, I guess that is one of the differences, I guess, with your client with clients in the illustration world, or especially for book covers. These are people who really know what they're looking for, and for the most part, as educated as tattoo clients have become, they're still not educated like someone who is putting a book out, I guess, and wants a particular aesthetic to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that you don't want the client to pick the wrong one.
Right.
Because, that's true. That's why I try to give them fewer options, or just two of the greatest things that I'd really want to paint, you know. But, and usually, I mean, it's interesting. I had a client recently that I did a Photoshop painting. I rendered it up. I thought I was pretty happy with it, but it was tighter than my normal stuff. And he came back and said, I like it when it was, this many stages back. And I did have it saved, on the computer, and so, he wanted, and I was like, really? It's just, there's part of it that one end of it was rendered a little bit, and there were parts of it that were just kind of basic blobs. And I was like, are you sure? He said, oh, yeah. So we went with that. But, I mean.
Yeah. I will say, though, just having watched you work for so many years, we used to do drawing nights, bring in a model and do drawing nights at your studio. And I always I felt like I learned more setting up kind of just off to the side of your shoulder. I learned more just watching you lay stuff out in the early stages about just like form and light than I probably did in art school, because you do have your knack for like getting the point across quickly and efficiently is pretty impressive, and that's probably what that person is like. If people start to see that that's what you do well, then they may just want to see it at that point. I can see that.
I think he was asking where's the progress, and that's what I had at the moment. So I sent it to him.
Yeah.
And I guess he just fell in love with that one.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to also mention I was in Seattle for a few years, and I went to this studio called Studio Paradiso, and they had figure drawing every week. And I actually went twice a week, and I'm telling you, like you were talking about, I learned more in that period going there every week than I did all of art school. I mean, it was just great to paint with everybody, and there were several regulars there that were doing that same thing, like getting shapes in quick, and it was like this speed painting thing, and there was drawing on one night and then a 3-hour pose on another night.
Yeah, and you would just kind of watch people's progress kind of as the night.
Yeah, and I took a couple of workshops there too. Stephen Assail, I took a workshop with him, or two of them actually, 2 workshops.
Yeah,
and David Gray, and it was really invaluable experience going there. It was awesome.
I think that Stephen Assail did something in Little Rock, kind of an impromptu workshop that I didn't find out about until way too late to actually get into it. But I thought it was so crazy that he was in. Does he have any affiliation with Little Rock?
I have no idea.
Maybe it was just a studio that brought him in or something like that. But yeah, that's super cool. And I think for some people, like, it's just some people, the way that some people make marks kind of relate, you can read it more easily. So you may have a great teacher that just their process, getting back to process, their process just doesn't like resonate with you all that well. Maybe it sounds too tedious, or like, maybe you don't want to take 50 photos of something, and maybe you just like the immediacy of some of it. And then some people have a process that just it seems like it makes sense to you and it works for you. That's what I thought. I was never any good with charcoal, but drawing with you for those few years, I learned how to block in masses a lot more efficiently. I learned how to judge relationships faster, and things like that. And then just where I didn't need edges or lines, stuff like that. And I know I was probably taught a lot of that stuff in another way in art school, but it didn't stick. I didn't get it. You know what I mean? But then whenever you would lay out, an arm doing like this, and then the forearm doing that, and then you would just like turn the charcoal on the side, and then lightly lay in a line at the top of the forearm that just represents how it stops. It's like, oh yeah, that's I understand that. That it looks like it should, and it's like, and it was done in the simplest way possible, and that kind of just like stuck with me better.
Yeah, there were a couple artists. I worked on that all in Seattle at the studio. I mean, there were a couple artists that were working that way, just blocking in values. It was all about values, blocking in, and to hell with lines. It was it was the kind of thing where you wanted your image to look photographic if you stood 20 feet away from it, and you go, oh, that's got to be a photo, and you go up to it, and it's just a series of shapes. Though that kind of magic is really cool to me, and I'm interested in doing more without painting. And I got into it a lot more up there.
Yeah. How were going back to some of the illustration work for hire? Whenever you're making something to work book size, do you? Well, I guess how much larger are you typically like drawing it out so that you get that effect, or can you even achieve that kind of effect? You know what I mean? Like where something looks completely photorealistic from a distance, and you get close and you're like, oh no, it's actually like that's just a little blob of yellow and white that makes that light look like it's glowing, and it's just surrounded by a lot of dark stuff.
Yeah. I think on book covers require even more than that. Yeah, more of that stuff. Because especially now, a lot of these books that I've done were just on demand print on demand or on Amazon, and you're just looking at a little thumbnail. And you have to make sure it works as a thumbnail, so you zoom out and you're on when you're working on it digitally or walk across the room if it's a traditional painting, and just make sure it works on that level, because and I think it's more interesting because if you're working that way and you zoom in, your eye is putting those shapes together anyway. So you don't even need to do that. If you're incorporating what the human eye does anyway, it'll do all the work for you.
Yeah.
And that I just like that sort of transition, that magic that those images too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are especially like old traditional illustrators that just mastered that.
Right.
They were awesome at it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like for me if I try to over render, if I find myself blending in paint, or really a lot of times even in tattooing these days, it starts to look forced and stiff really, really quickly and like awkward. I'm really like, I can go from something looking natural to looking awkward with just by blending stuff together. It's so crazy.
Right. Yeah. You have to watch some of that.
Yeah.
I mean, in oil, you can come back from that and play around with it. Tattoos, I guess not so much. Oops, no. I blended that in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, you kind of do have to keep it as simple as you possibly can, even in tattoos. So back to your process, sticking with the book cover. How do you decide whether you're doing it with traditional or digital now?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I've gotten more into digital work just because I've had a lot of trouble photographing the traditional stuff and transferring it digitally, because I can never get that color working just the way I need it. But I don't know. It depends on how much time I have too. Sometimes I'll if the client has more time, I'll do an oil painting.
Yeah, I would imagine that's kind of the trick. And if I remember right, when you were in Memphis, you actually had a photographer a few doors down that used to photograph some stuff.
Well, yeah, I don't have that in Arkansas.
Right.
He was great. And he had the whole polarized filter thing that takes all the reflective light out, and it's I'm just not a great photographer.
I've started doing that. That's become really big in tattooing because of glare and fresh tattoos. They're just shiny, and I started noticing that people just had like perfectly flat, even, beautiful like photographs of fresh tattoos, and I'm like, there's no way that's real, and that's what it is. It's like this combination of the filter on the camera and then also an actual filter on your light. And you just kind of little polarized lens thing is awesome. And you can definitely like cheat it and make tattoos look way kind of better than they really are. Because if you use that, it kind of flattens everything, and then you can pull it in and like use filters to saturate or push contrast. So you can really go overboard with it. But if you use it just to remove the reflected light, they're awesome. That stuff's really cool. So are you drawing? So are you drawing mostly in Photoshop when you do draw digitally now?
Mostly in Photoshop. I have Clip Studio too, and that's a good.
Oh yeah.
Mostly like the thumbnail stage is all Photoshop because I'm just trying to get it in quick, and you can pop in color quick and everything.
So going through that Photoshop kind of process, once you have you've thumbnailed, the client's helped you decide or has decided which direction they want to go. You've used your figures or whatever it takes, whether it's invented or whether you pull it from the internet or take your own photo reference, and you've assembled this thing in Photoshop. What kind of tools do you use in Photoshop to start? Just sketching like you would with a pencil? Like, do you just use like white background and a blue pencil and go at it, or are you dropping stuff in and tracing it out, or dropping your thumbnails in and
I usually I usually do I usually have a second window next to me, so I can draw from that. I'm just used to having a reference next door, and I know other digital artists that do just drop it in, and they'll just manipulate stuff and paint over stuff or put it through a filter, and I have not figured that out, and it's just I don't know. It's just part of working with oils for so long that it's just easier for me to just start drawing.
Yeah.
But you can adjust all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of great tools. But
Do you start in grayscale and go color, or do you go straight color from the start of it? Like just start painting?
I just go straight with color. Yeah.
Yeah. And are you working like you would in paint, going from like background to foreground and making it more intense as you go, or do you just kind of, is there any process there? It's just whatever seems like it needs attention.
It's whatever kind of. I mean, I'm trying to stick with the reference. Like I try to make all the decisions in the reference or in the thumbnail of where the star is, where I want to go with, value and everything. So I'm not doing a lot of guesswork at the final stage. I'm sticking with my plan, and then, but there's a lot of ways you can sort of bring out your star this way or that, using all kinds of tools.
Yeah.
Cheating is what it's called. Cheating.
Yeah. It's funny because I see illustrators will have all of these, they'll have all these brush sets. Like you can buy brush sets from different illustrators that they use in Photoshop, and I have a bunch of them, and I really, what bothers me so much a lot of times is I just, no matter what the brush looks like, whenever the little cursor that's over it, I just want that thing to be round. I don't want it to look like some crazy palette knife or something that really messes with my brain. So I don't use a lot of them because I don't like seeing maybe you can just take that off. Can you take that off of the? Do you know what I'm talking about? When you put your stylus up to the screen, you'll see the little. Scott, you're the computer guy. What do you see? It's like a pointer, yeah, but but it might be the shape of a slash or something. Yeah, I hate that kind of stuff. So that's why I don't use a lot of. You don't see that? Oh.
I guess I don't quite know what you're referring to, but
I could pull it up, but it'd be real boring for them.
Yeah, right.
Hey, look over here. Let me show you something.
You know what I have? I have all these weird shaped brushes, but when you start using a lot, you can see these patterns, in a lot of the brushwork, which bug me. I don't like that. So I always go back with the smudge tool and just make it look like it's not a one pattern thing that's repeating.
Yeah. Do you know a illustrator named Peter Moorbacher? He does these really, really beautiful. Andy Chambers introduced me to him, and he does these really beautiful kind of digital paintings. They're very atmospheric and soft, and these big, crazy, looming kind of creatures and things. And I watched him do a 3-hour live stream one day, and the same thing. He just uses a soft round brush and the smudge tool, and that's it. And then he's kind of tweaking the size up and down, and that's about it. It made me feel so good to see that he was making paintings like that with just a soft round brush and a smudge tool.
And a nice, shapely eraser tool helps too. It's really nice.
Yeah. See, Ash, I don't do a lot of shapes with the eraser either. I'd always just use a round one. So maybe I could play with that and see. Outside of Photoshop, what was in Smart School, the program, the 3D kind of program that the Dave Palumbo you said was using?
Oh, it's called Daz 3D, and I think it's free. And you can get a couple of figures for free, but you're paying for all of the different figures beyond that.
Okay.
I don't know. I've downloaded it. I haven't messed around with it much.
Okay. That's what I see artists that are using, tattooers who are using, the first one that I knew of was ZBrush, where you would actually digitally sculpt and light and stuff like that. It seemed overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
The program wasn't, it was probably comparably priced to Photoshop or something back when you bought Photoshop, and I think it's an $800 or $900 program. So I never bought it because of that. Just as a little bit too big of a barrier to entry, and the program itself just looked so overwhelming to me. But I see a lot of these guys that are especially doing black and gray realism, maybe with what do you call this style where it's it'll be maybe some type of Greek statues, and there'll be all of this this big filigree or these Corinthian columns looming over them, and they do these tattoos look so beautiful. I'm giving you a lot of stuff to try to pull up during this episode. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, you don't have to do all of them. You can cut some of this out if you want. But I see them doing those in those types of programs where they're like, I don't know. That's why I was asking about Dave Palembo's. I don't know if they're actually sculpting all that and then playing with the lighting. You're playing with that lighting all digitally and stuff, or if they those really are just figures that you can buy and assemble and light.
Well, I haven't seen this stuff, but you can buy. There's so much stuff you can buy. I mean,
buy
it's
and
just crazy. In fact, I use a program called Sketchfab.
I've heard of that.
Or it's a website, and it has all these 3D images on there, or 3D models, and just in the preview, you can move them around and look at them. And I draw from that sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, I wish there was a way to, pay for just the use of the image, because I think on there you pay for it, and you have the whatever the model in your computer. I mean, you can do whatever you want with it, print it out. A lot of them are like for 3D printers or stuff.
Oh, really? Okay. Huh. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. I use one called just on my iPad that Proco. Do you know Stan Prokopенko?
Yeah,
He's got a huge YouTube channel.
It's weird. When I was at the Watson studio, he was there.
Oh, really?
And he was one of our teachers for one of the classes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Seems like a really nice guy.
Yeah, he was great. It was cool.
Yeah, I know. I knew that he trained under. He went to the Watts Atelier, and Jeff Watts has been on his show a handful of different times. But he has an app called Skelly.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen that? That one's pretty cool.
Yeah. I haven't used it, but I have seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's every piece of the skeleton articulates. I mean, and you can change the angle, the viewpoint, the lighting, everything. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
There's this other thing on Smart School. It was like a program where, and I'll send you the link. It's like any kind of animal skull they have on there. They have a whole list of animal skulls, and it's a 3D thing, and you can move it in any way you want, and it'll find an image of that animal, any image of that animal at that angle that's on the web.
Huh.
Like that's a great resource for artists.
That's crazy.
Like I need a lion looking this way.
I'm
going to move the lion skull this way and just hit enter, and it'll just bring up the angle you need. I mean, that's
huge.
Usually you're looking through all these pictures of lions to find the right one that's pointed the right way.
That's 99% of the time if I'm like scouring Pinterest or Google Images, it's only for that. It's to find it that's facing the right way or that's from the right perspective
or has the right lighting.
Yeah. That's super cool. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'll send you that link, and it's
technology.
Free. Yeah,
so crazy. Okay, so before we wrap it up, because we're gonna go get dinner. What I've been asking everyone towards the end is is there a piece that we could drop in of yours that I don't know whether these stories have kind of gone all over the place so far, but a piece where you feel that you hit a home run with you in any way, whether it's the compositionally it worked really well, or there's a story behind it, and maybe it started out in the wrong direction, and you saved it a certain way, or the narrative comes through really clearly that you were trying to get across. Can you think of anything you've done recently, whether it's a comic, whatever, it doesn't matter, painting, anything? I
did a painting for one of the Smart School classes, and it was a robot, and he's it's a pulp cover, and he's in front of this wall outside, and the wall is littered with old movie posters. And it was a lot of fun to do. It was really complicated to paint. It's all done in oil, but I'm really proud of it. And what happened was I had this really basic robot character that I wanted to do. I'm started writing the story. It's like a pulp robot, like 1940s, and the story for the actual script started coming together as I was painting this thing. So a lot of the posters that are in it are sort of started to become elements to this narrative. So I started writing all these notes as I was painting. It was kind of cool.
Oh, yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's used as the kind of in the background to tell the story. That's super cool. It's funny, that kind of goes, our last episode that just came out was with a tattooer named Teresa Sharp, and background was the thing that she kind of focused the conversation on more than anything. Like, and in tattooing, that is something a lot of people neglect, or backgrounds. Like, a lot of times, because you don't necessarily have to have a background all the time, but
No.
you can say so much with them. So yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, a
Right
lot
on.
of tattoos are just sort of
Yeah.
objects or
Yeah,
designs.
just a
Yeah.
bold outline or a color wash or
Mhm.
whatever, and if you're trying to tell a story, why not try to sneak some stuff in there that like takes that tattoo to a different level, or at least like piques the interest of people in a new or different way, yeah.
Yeah, like hiding things that are, people would explore the more they look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always loved that. I've never been good at it, but I've always loved that idea, and that's why I'm glad that you came on, because that was one of the things early on when I was like going through and looking at your paintings before we knew each other very well, and like I felt like that I just kind of walked in a lot of times on like something that I should know, and of course at that point in time I felt like I should have known the people in the paintings, because probably we were close to the same age or something like that, and it's just like so
the
often
portraits are done.
or no, like I was saying earlier, whether it's the kids playing video games, or the one where like the
right.
kid is like flying the airplane in the
Oh, yeah.
foreground, his mom's in the what's the rest of that one, like his mom's in the passed
she's
out in
like
the back
in the
or something.
background trying to look at he's in front of the TV.
Oh,
and
she's trying to look at the TV,
He's
yeah.
blocking the TV, and she's like,
Yeah, so it's not that it's even that's what I thought was so cool, is it was kind of every day. Like a lot of that stuff is kind of every day. So it's not like there's some huge narrative there, but it's like a moment like in time that you can relate to, because I was in the way of the TV for my mom probably a lot too. Yeah.
Well, that was a whole theme for a long time in my oils, as I was doing these. I was trying to come up with narratives that were not specific, and that the viewer could come and fill in the story. They were bringing their own experience. It was like, interactive in that way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make the narratives really vague, so they would add their own thing. Like, you're responding to, oh, I've been there, or I've been playing video games doing that, or what's going on there that's weird,
Yeah.
I enjoyed kind of playing with people's ideas.
Yeah. I love that too. That was one of the. I didn't ask you that question, but it was one of the questions I asked in the first few episodes. Were how important is it for the viewer to like get the narrative that you were trying to convey, or are you cool with them like creating their own story most of the time? And we've gotten some different answers. Like, we had Nick Baxter on. It was the first show, and he had he reads a lot. He has a lot of strong kind of social ideas and opinions, and his paintings are very like time consuming and tedious and beautiful. And I think to an extent it is kind of important that people get the message that he's trying to get across, but then like to your point, it's just like fill in the blank.
Yeah. I mean, I always enjoyed those kind of paintings in museums,
Yeah.
like what is happening, who is this? And I liked filling in my own stories rather than finding out what the artist said,
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's lots of different ways of going about narrative.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you. I'm
Thank
glad we
you.
got to hang out.
Yeah.
Let's go eat some Mexican food.
Cool. Sounds
And,
good.
Scott's not coming. So thank
Why
you
not?
guys, as always, for supporting what we do. And hopefully this all went okay. I'm happy to have a real life podcast. We use these microphones only because I forgot that we can't both talk into the one microphone I've been using by myself for the last year and a half. So that's why we have like headsets on, like we're at
sportscaster.
Yeah, exactly.
From the 80s.
Yeah, we're starting over, relearning how it all works. Thank you. We'll see you guys next time.
Hey, thanks again for watching. If you haven't already, we ask that you would subscribe to our channel so you can stay up to date with new episodes. Also, if you've gotten any value out of our show at all, we would be honored if you would buy us a beer at our Patreon link. And finally, if you'd like to visit our website and sign up for our newsletter, you can find out where we are going, if we're going to be in a town near you, maybe tatting at a convention or something like that. And while you're there, you can pick up some Fireside merchandise like a new t-shirt or a hoodie or a coffee mug. Thanks again.